I'm Dr. Cath Watson. Welcome to the PD Pet Care Vlogs. We're all keen to see the best dogs that we can when it comes to breeding, but it's really important that we maintain genetic diversity. So what does that mean and how do we actually achieve that? So when it comes to genetic diversity, what we're talking about is making sure that our population of dogs overall, but also within breeds and those breeds within countries, making sure that we've got enough diversity amongst the dogs that we're not then breeding problems which may be unseen to start with until we actually get to a bottleneck in the population, where all of a sudden that gene becomes present in almost all dogs, and then we've got a problem on how we get rid of that problem. The best way to help with genetic diversity in your particular breed of dog would be to gain some knowledge on genetics and inheritance and how that works. It's not necessarily, some aspects of it are very, very simple, some of it is quite complex, but just making you understand where you can have an impact and how those genes are inherited and how that inheritance actually works, whether those genes are likely to be expressed or not, whether they're carriers, whether we're talking about affected animals, whether we're talking about clear animals. So just understanding what all that terminology means and where what you do when it comes to breeding your dogs actually has an impact. So there are a couple of key areas where we can have quite a big impact on genetic diversity. So first up, there are some dogs who clearly fit the type really well, seem to express everything we want in the breed. So it would be really easy to say we should just use that dog as the sire for all our puppies. But obviously there may be some genes that that dog's carrying that are not being expressed by that dog when bred with a bitch who's also a carrier, or if used over and over again are suddenly going to start becoming a problem because we have this bottleneck. So not using a popular sire too much. So limiting how much that sire is used within the country, within your breeding stock, but also making sure, if you happen to own that stag dog, that you're cautious about how often he's allowed to be used by others and who is using him over what bitches. Because if we limit that pool too much, then like I say, we're going to get that genetic bottleneck as well. Second thing would be to look at using an inbreeding calculator. So this is looking at the coefficient of inbreeding. So we're trying to minimise how closely related dogs are when they are bred, because the more closely related they are, the more likely they're going to share genes. And while some of those genes may be very good for the gene pool, others are going to concentrate and not be so good in the long term. So we want to avoid inbreeding wherever possible. It may be good in some circumstances where you can actually increase the incidence of maybe a genetic trait you're actually looking for, but you want to be really careful that you don't take that too far. So that's where that coefficient of inbreeding using an inbreeding calculator can help you work out whether the mating that you're planning is a good idea or not. When it comes to health tests, it's worth being very aware that while these can be really, really useful, and particularly for high impact problems within a breed, you do need to interpret them with care and understand that we don't have health tests for everything. So while it is important to select on the positive side of the health tests that are done, you need to keep in your back of your mind that actually there's a bunch of other potential health problems that we can't test for or aren't necessarily fully aware of in a breed yet. So you're still looking for the overall health of a dog. It's not all going to hinge on a positive or negative test from, say, a DNA genetic test for a specific problem. So don't select your breeding program based on one trait exclusively, be really careful with the way you use carriers and affected animals. So this is not saying you can't use them, because in some cases selective use of those animals bred to an appropriate mate is actually going to be helpful for general genetic diversity, even if that particular problem is one you're trying to get rid of. Because like I say, we don't have tests for everything, and getting rid of one problem may actually result in another showing up instead. Consider breeding between subpopulations. So we know for some breeds, obviously there are show lines and working lines and pet lines. So making sure that there's a bit of breeding across those lines as well to keep that diversity within the population. And again, crossbreeding, while generally when you're trying to keep a breed line pure, crossbreeding's not really what you're aiming at. Even if you are doing a deliberate cross to either help the health of your own breed or because you want to produce a crossbreed dog, then making sure that you do that with care, understanding that actually there can be health issues on both sides and healthy traits on both sides, and that what you are aiming to produce at the end of it is likely to be a healthy puppy who's going to be fit for purpose but fit for life, basically. If you want to know, the best thing you can do is gain some knowledge around genetics and inheritance. Dogs New Zealand have some good resources there, and seek advice from other breeders or contact Dogs New Zealand for help for where to go to look for advice. We are all aiming to produce healthy, happy dogs who are fit for the purpose in life that we want them for, and are fit to have a good life themselves, that's not going to result in early suffering, early death, that sort of thing. So there is no shame in asking for help, because it's going to help all of us in the long run think about some of those things that perhaps maybe wouldn't immediately spring to mind. Because like I say, at the end of the day, we're looking to maintain genetic diversity amongst our dogs so that we've got a healthy population.